A game that is obviously a spiritual successor to Dead Space. And a game that was created by the creator of Dead Space, none other than Glenn Schofield, was a game called the Callisto Protocol. And I gotta tell you, the Callisto Protocol was awesome. I thought it was awesome. I thought from story to the things that they were doing with like the different like horde modes and all this different stuff, they were creating something really special. I believe that. The problem was that they dumped so much resource and development into it. Negative word of mouth. Dead Space Remake comes out around the same time, and it really hurt the IP in a way that now the question is, well, will they ever make a Callisto Protocol 2? Was there a plan to make a Callisto Protocol 2? Let's talk about it. In an article, guys, coming to us from Edwin Evans Thurwell of Rock Paper Shotgun, former Striking Distance CEO, shares details of cut material, disagreements with Krafton, and losses during the pandemic. The Dead Space developer and Striking Distance co-founder Glenn Schofield left Striking Distance last September following lower than hoped sales and mixed reviews for the studio's debut project, the Callisto Protocol. Now he's back to share a little about the horror game's difficult development, offering details of cut materials, a complicated relationship with parent company Krafton, the impact of the pandemic, and abandoned plans for a sequel. Striking Distance was founded in 2019 as part of Krafton's efforts to establish revenue streams beyond their legendary battle royale Plunkbat, aka PUBG Battlegrounds. The Callisto Protocol began life as a game in the PUBG universe, but eventually became its own thing, heavily inspired by Dead Space. It was a tough project from the outset. We started off with a new studio, a new company, a new IP, a new everything, Schofield recalled to Alan. And then we're 6 months into it, and they say, by the way, there's new consoles. They actually thought, let's just switch to PS5. And I said, well, that's a magnitude harder. We're talking millions of dollars more. Nonetheless, Schofield said the relationship between Striking Distance and Krafton was positive at first. I really liked working with them for the first couple of years. It was really the last year or so before I left, we went public, and it put an awful strain on the company, the board of directors, and everybody else, and then they put the strain on us. Amongst other things, Schofield feels he was deceived about how much time Striking Distance had to finish the game, which led to impractical project scoping. I wanted about 3.5 more months, and I was led to believe for about 4 months, that that's the way it was going to be. He said, actually in October or September of 21, I was told that, you're going to get the time, just no regrets. That was the term that kept being used, no regrets. Just put whatever you want into the game. And so this is a perfect situation, guys, of like a developer, a publisher, kind of saying like, all the right things. And then as push came to shove, you start getting a little bit of, some pressure from investors and things of that nature. Then it changes from 3 months to, hey, we need it right now. And so you can think of games like CD Projekt Red. They were pressured by investors to release the game early, and look what happened with Cyberpunk 2077. Now, they were able to recover because they were able to dump a lot of resource and development into bugs and fixing all of those things. But with this title, that being the Callisto Protocol, they weren't able to do that. And I would have loved to see what the finished product really would have looked like. And yes, they did get it to a stable place, that being Striking Distance Studios. But I would have loved to see a few more months. Let it be separate. At the end of the day, from a business perspective, you have Dead Space Remake. Let Dead Space Remake do its thing. Let's release a little bit later, after Dead Space the Remake. And, that way you get the wave of people that get Dead Space Remake, and then they can get the Callisto Protocol a few months later. I would have loved to see that as well. Schofield and other Striking Distance devs spent the Christmas 2021 holiday working on the game, just designing, coming up with other ideas with some of the guys. And January comes around, and some of the Krafton folks come over, and they said, no, it's December of 2022. And I was like, it's not going to get done, and it's going to cost you more money. It's not like it costs you less money because you're getting it out 3 months sooner. No, because if I just kept it on the way it was going, I wouldn't have to add anybody. But if you want it done, I got to accelerate everything by 3.5 months, which means I need to jam people on here. If I need 20 people, I actually need to get 30 or 40 because that learning curve will not adjust. In hindsight, Schofield said he would have put my foot down on not shipping it, to the point of challenging Krafton to take away control of the company. If you want the game to ship, come take over the studio and ship it. Sometimes you don't know who you are. And 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, who am I? Telling these guys I'm not going to ship it. I should have, absolutely. And I agree. Schofield is one of the biggest names in gaming as far as from a creative directive perspective. Glenn Schofield has done everything. He's done Call of Duty. You know, he's shipped some of the biggest games on planet Earth. And so I think he's got a lot of clout for sure within the studio, like within the studios and the publishers and the developers. He should be able to, he should have put his foot down. There's no doubt about it. So that's on him for not putting his foot down. But at the same time, Krafton should have given them the time that they needed to ship the game. Schofield certainly isn't without fault. Amid all this, in October 2022, he boasted on Twitter about striking distance staff working 6 to 7 days a week. Schofield subsequently apologized in an interview with Inverse for making his employees crunch on the game and promised to keep healthier working hours in the future. I'd be interested to get some perspective on his management tactics from other members of Striking Distance, former or current. The Callisto Protocol met with iffy verdicts at launch, not at least thanks to technical problems on PC. In the wake of its release, Schofield says that Striking Distance and Krafton essentially stopped talking to each other. As we're making DLC, I kid you not, they started ignoring me. The game came out December 2nd. As we're making DLC, I'm telling the team to start patching. I'm going to go out to the community. I'm going to ask them for help. We know what we want to put in the game and we're just going to patch it. And so we just kept patching, and Krafton weren't talking to us. They were just like, where's the DLC? We did 86 patches, and in 3.5 months, that's what we needed. And on PlayStation Network, it kicked ass. The reviews were really good. According to Schofield, Krafton lacked the experience as a company to nurture an original video game property beyond PUBG. What new IPs need around them is some steady guys. But the truth is, they were so new at the time, they didn't have any new evergreen type games. He feels it's absurd that Krafton haven't, that we know of, greenlit a sequel given the amount that had to be chopped from the Callisto Protocol during development. The fact they're not making it is ridiculous because Callisto, we had to cut 2.5 bosses out of it. I mean, I had to cut like 3 or 4 enemies out of it. Some of these cuts were brought about not by Krafton's release schedule, but staff sickness during the ongoing pandemic. America lost 1.2 million people, right? Schofield said. This wasn't like, oh, they're getting sick. One of my best friends, my college roommate, died. We all lost people. On top of that, when someone got sick, and inevitably, you have a studio of 200, 250 people, 10 to 20 people a month were getting sick, and they were getting sick for weeks, right? We were devastated. It was sometimes our whole department of VFX would be out. Our animation department, differences between how the US and South Korean governments handled the pandemic exacerbated communication difficulties with Krafton. When I would call in Korea, they're not having that problem, right? You know, we don't follow rules as well, maybe in the US. I don't know what it is, but we have a bigger country. You know, it doesn't matter. Schofield's abandoned plans for the sequel include a story concept featuring side character Dani Nakamura as lead. Another scenario would have brought back the original game's Jacob, who was voice acted by Josh Duhamel. I wanted to bring back Josh, but I actually wanted to act like he was dead and start off with a different character, and then halfway through, this character dies, and then they're like, well, we know one guy, and then you surprisingly bring him back, Schofield says. I thought the Callisto Protocol was awesome. I loved it. I thought it was a great game. I think that there was a lot of potential for the future. The fact that he had to cut bosses and cut characters and all those different things, I would have found a way, like, at least in my mind, I'm like, okay, we don't want to cut these bosses. We don't want to cut these different, you know, some of these enemies. It's important that these guys are in the game somehow, some way. We got to figure out those things, make it. And then when the game releases, you know, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be glitches. So we got to do a lot of patches for those things. But I just personally think it would have been awesome to see this game with all the extra bosses and the variety of enemies. I think that would have been really special. Ultimately, Krafton, I think they messed up in a number of ways, and I think Glenn and the studio, that being Striking Distance, messed up in a number of ways as well. Doesn't look like we'll ever get a Callisto Protocol 2. I really would have loved to see a Callisto Protocol 2 because, man, from the marketing to the graphics, the just everything, man, the marketing material, I thought it looked great. But we'll have to wait and see, guys. If a Callisto Protocol 2, maybe Krafton will sell the IP, similar to maybe if EA sells the Dead Space IP. That would be something really special as well. Let me know, though, guys, what you think about the canceled project, the Callisto Protocol 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you think that this is something that should come back into the future? I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. And for more of the Callisto Protocol 2 content and videos, keep it right here.